All right, so in case you guys have not heard, yesterday night there was a post on the TFT subreddit, the competitive TFT subreddit specifically, where a longtime challenger player, I've ran into this guy on ladder, I know who he is, and he's a player that obviously yaps. He's a person in the competitive TFT Discord and a really active member of it, but he's also like a community member. He contributes. He posts in chat. He's posted guides before. So I actually think that this person isn't just like a complainer. If you actually look at his history, they've actually done like a lot of stuff over the years. Okay, maybe not that much, but they've like contributed, right? This is not just a person complaining just to complain. It's not a person who's hard stuck. It's a top percentile player, and I know who Tofo is. And he made a long post titled "Competitive TFT is no longer fun to play." Now, I thought that originally this post was about tournaments, which I was interested by because the TFT Pro Circuit has been well received so far. But it was actually about the state of climbing TFT if you are a competitive player. So let's go ahead and read this post. We'll read some reactions to it, like small of it. I'll give a little bit of my response. But then what makes this interesting, the reason why you're going to want to continue watching either this video or watching the stream, is that Mortdog actually responded to this and talked about it almost bullet for bullet and went pound for pound. And a lot of people respond to that as well. There's some of the most active the subreddit's been in a while. And it's compounded by the fact that Mortdog is no longer streaming for the indefinite future. We'll see. Maybe he comes back next set. You know, it's this, you know, this revolving door of Mortdog. Maybe he's here, maybe he's not. Maybe he doesn't stream ever again. It could be somewhere in between. Either way, this is the most amount that we've ever seen Mortdog actually talk about TFT, because if you ever look at his Twitter account, he's actually not been posting for quite some time. Remember, Mort used to be posting like all these different ideas and like different design stuff, but ever since basically his hiatus from streaming, he hasn't really been public facing in almost any way. So that's why I think this is maybe worth checking out. Okay, so the post says, "Hi, I'm Christopho, and I just take counter to set and been consistently challenged for a few years now." And here's his proof. "I want to start off by saying I think TFT in general is a fun game. Riot does a good job at creating new set themes and making new units and traits to make every set feel unique. However, in this post, I will be talking about the problems of trying to play TFT competitively, by which I mean focus on placements and winning games." Talking about climbing TFT. "I've been playing TFT competitively for a few years now because I enjoy the skill expression in this game and winning by playing games well. However, in the past few sets, I noticed a decline in the design of sets, which make playing the game competitively so much less fun than it used to be from the era before set 7. It's interesting that he's choosing set 7 because set 7, in my opinion, was a terrible set. I actually, I don't like admitting it, but it's like the only time, and I made sure it was the only time, where actually I got so mad, I like actually hit my desk. Like I'm not like a physical rager, but like set 7 was the only time this ever happened. I realized that TFT was getting me so mad, and so I drew some boundaries with it. But that was like the only time I ever actually got, like, I actually raged at TFT. So it's interesting that he chooses that, because that's where I would kind of start to draw like a line as well. Because that was a dragon set, if you don't know. Dragons, Siphon, Shioyu, like people just high roll an itis on stage 2, and they literally could fast 9 and have infinite gold 3-star legendaries like that. It was like that set was pretty bad for many reasons, but we don't want to talk about that. I hope that by talking about the major issues that ruin the competitive experience of TFT, the community will start to notice why many games feel so unfun to play. And this is a phrase that people have been saying a lot, that they're just not having fun playing TFT, right? And that's the whole premise of this entire headline. It's no longer fun to play. It feels so unfun to play. Why is that? Riot will change the way they create TFT sets in the future, right? He's hoping that this will help influence the designers from the competitive player's perspective. He starts off with his TLDR. Flex play is dead and has been replaced by committing to inflexible comps on 2-1. This is not due to balance issue, but mostly design issues. That is also something that is interesting, that he's saying that it's not about balance, it's mostly about design, which I don't know if I necessarily agree with, but we'll keep going. In this post, I'll talk about the major problem I have with the way TFT sets are designed right now. Individual units have little value and vertical traits scale too well. In the past few sets, you probably noticed that most of the top comps in this game have been sort of some vertical trait comp. In this set, it takes the form of 6 Duelists, Ashe Udyr, 5 Prodigy, Yuumi Leona, 4 Mentor, Ryze, 6 Protector, Nico Lulu, 7 Battle Academia, 6 Sorcerer, 8 Soul Fighter, 4 Luchador, 6 Juggernaut. So now you may have noticed that I'm just listing every comp that's been in the meta since the start of set 15. And that's because I did. This is the main reason why the game feels so bad at certain times. Everything leads back to this. So let's talk about what causes and what Riot can do to fix this. A while ago, the TFT team decided the support units are bad for the game and have since removed them. Every unit in TFT now requires items to be useful. Otherwise, they walk around your board in fights until they die. Also, not 100% true, but generally that is correct. Combined with the fact that most traits are very selfish and only benefits the units with the same trait, full vertical trait comps are super incentivized and as a result have been the only meta comps for the past few sets. If you only have enough item sets for 2 units and room for 8 units on your board, the only benefit you can get with these other 6 slots is by playing 6 more useless units that have the same trait as your carry and tank to boost them. These full vertical trait boards become a problem once you start to play to win, because then you realize how inflexible the comps really are. To give you an example of how ridiculous it gets, imagine you have this Prodigy board. If you have no more items left and you had a 2-star Braum, who would you replace him for Garen? If you had a 2-star Zyra, would you replace her for Syndra? I probably wouldn't play any other version of this board, no matter what I hit. This is what makes the game so unfun to play competitively. The only other way to play around a certain unit is to play the exact cookie cutter comp that fits around their traits. Every roll down is just putting the comp in the team planner and buying the exact units you have marked. This I agree with. I think it's like if you hit Braum 2, you're not putting it over Garen. If you hit Zyra 2, you're not playing that over Syndra. If you hit, for a while, I mean, this is where balance comes into, but even if you hit Seraphine, it didn't really meaningfully spike your board because it really mattered about other things. That's where I think balance is an issue, but I mean, that's a different answer. But I think they're generally correct about this. This becomes a big problem when you realize there's variance in the game. I think we all realize that. But what if we don't hit Leona 2 or Cassandra 2 while playing Yuumi? Can I play 2-star Set, Jarvan, or Poppy? Kind of, but playing a 1-star Leona would be better than having an alternative 2-star and losing your traits. It's also true. This leads to having absolutely no flexibility on roll downs. Roll downs feel like a lot like watching a slot machine spin. You just roll until you see the exact unit you want. You don't want to look at other forecasts that show up and weigh your options and alternatives. You just hope you find the exact unit you're looking for. So when you lose, instead of thinking, I could have played it better, you just think, well, I missed on the roll down. It makes the competitive experience so much less fun. You just keep saying that. It says, it's just, this is what I don't like, and it's so much less fun. This is also what makes you feel like you're locked into playing a certain comp from 2-1 because there's no overlap between different comps like Mech Mentor and Yuumi. You're not able to flex between the 2 comps in your roll down as it costs too much gold to hold the necessary units for both boards. This results in the optimal game plan being to start off with the early game units that will also be on your board late game, like Ezreal and Syndra to Yuumi. And then you know exactly how you're going to play the game 3 minutes in, which is not fun. It does not feel very skillful. Again, this is actually how he's just concluding every paragraph, by the way. It's just not fun. I don't know if I necessarily say it's not skillful, but I can definitely buy the no fun part. So what can Riot do to fix this? Giving units a strong base power, so 2-star units, alternative units on your roll down, and playing them without maxing out your vertical synergy is somewhat viable. Second thing, adding some support units that can benefit your team without needing them, either having good ability that buffs your team or having a non-selfish vertical trait that gives team-wide benefits. Or 3, threat type units with no traits, which would also be good to have, creating alternatives for item holds that are easy to play. I would argue there are a few this set. I would say like Zyra and Twisted Fate, and to a certain extent Cassandra are like that, but there's not that many, and those are very, very hard units to find and play. And even we talked about, you still wouldn't even play Zyra on this board unless you just literally didn't find any of these units. So that would make sense. To address the argument that support should be OP in the best version of the board, I would like to say that is a good thing. At least when the best version of the meta comp has the supports units in it. You have the alternative of playing units in the same vertical trait. It is better to have the options of playing both the vertical version of the board and a support version of the board and being able to make more decisions rather than the current state of TFT when you can make a vertical version of any board. That's all I have for this post. I hope you enjoy reading it. I'm interested to see what everyone else thinks about this as well. So we can start from the very top, which is, generally speaking, I agree with the sentiment that Tofo is bringing here. I think that verticals are too strong. If you look at our TFT Academy tier list, you can't even refute that. And vertical, if you guys don't know, just means building the same thing higher and higher. And while you're not playing vertical Battle Academia, you're playing vertical Prodigy. And that's because Vive Prodigy is too good. And the value of it is super high. But if they nerf Prodigy, then people would just maybe build 7 Battle Academia. That problem wouldn't really change. With Duelist, you always want 6 Duelists because it gives you a breakpoint of 6, right? It gives you durability, right? Supreme Cell, you're gonna always want to play around Supreme Cell. Although I think it's like kind of disingenuous to call Supreme Cell a vertical because it's only half your board. And the fact that we have variations of like Kai'Sa, like this is actually an example of something that's a little bit more dynamic of a reroll comp. I actually think Kai'Sa is a good example of like her traits kind of mattering, or like a more maybe not a good, maybe like not a bad example, right? It's like it's probably like a net positive, but you can play different versions of the board. But that I'm detracting. There's still many examples of it. Crystal Gambit, you always want Crystal Gambit. Reroll Jace, you always want it. This is double trouble, but you know, if you're playing protectors, you're always going to want 6. So on and so forth. This is basically this across everything, 6 Soul Fighter. And the number one reason why this exists, because the first thing, if this is the first time ever hearing this argument, you're going to be like, that guy's right. That's just a bad design thing, right? Because that's the whole point that he's pointing at design and not balance. Mostly design issues. Is that players hate when traits are bait. Players just on average really hate it if traits are useless. Let's take another example. Let's take an easy counter example here. Who here is excited to play 6 heavyweights? I don't think anybody here thinks heavyweights is awesome unless you're doing something really crazy like rerolling Darius and Jace. A lot of people actually think heavyweights is silly, right? And it feels bad to play more heavyweights and then you realize it sucks. Another example, who here is excited to play sorcerers right now? Yeah, maybe a patch ago, but now it feels like almost bait to try to play into this vertical. And there's a lot of examples we can counterpoint to it. It's like, yes, some verticals are really strong and others aren't. But the reason why I bring this up is because a lot of people really dislike when it feels like there's this big thing that they're supposed to play towards and it feels like you're not supposed to, because the answer is to never play for these verticals and instead be play for this kind of board, right? This board with Varus, for example, there's traits like matter, but they actually kind of don't. What is the most important thing about this board? In chat, I'm asking chat. I generally try. It's hard for me to like answer chat right now because I'm trying to explain the situation. But what is the most important thing about this board when you're playing Varus? Cookies says hitting your legendary 2 stars. That's pretty close. Daniel says Varus 2. That's correct. All that matters is hitting Varus 2 and then hitting K'Sante. Once you hit that, the game just gets put on rails for the rest of the game and you're just chilling. And that is the inverse problem of what is described here, which is like theoretically if traits didn't matter as much, then it's just like, well, you just play the best unit that's individually powerful and then you just build around that, which a lot of people may like, but here's another issue with something that's like theoretically flex is that, well, one, balance is going to be a problem, which is why I don't necessarily agree that this is not due to balance issue. I think a lot of this is actually balance. I actually would say that this is like 75% balance if I were to weigh it, because I don't even know what they mean necessarily by design issues, because the reality is everything that he described here is a balance issue. If they just simply made every vertical 5% stronger than the other thing, then we wouldn't see verticals, right? If Prodigy gave one more mana regen and no actual benefit, no one would be playing it. I'm pretty sure it's almost entirely balanced for what he's describing. I'm not entirely sure what he means by design, but I understand that he's talking about systemically there is a problem with how verticals are pushed and how important it is for you to hold on to the 1-cost shitters, right? We're talking about Ezreal and Syndra. Like, if you don't have these units, how can you go from a mech board rolling over to Yuumi? Because all these upgrades matter. All these upgrades matter. Same thing. If you're playing like an Ashe Juggernaut line and you want to go into Star Guardians because you hit, you hit Jinx, how are you going to go back for Syndra and Rel and Xayah? And these are really important units, right? So that part I completely understand. And maybe that's the element of design where maybe there's ways for you to get back into it. But I think mostly this is a balance issue. But I do agree that it feels bad. It feels bad. I think that TFT is way. I think to say that this is what the game should be, that it should be commit early and build around what you do. I think it sells TFT short. I think the beauty of TFT is the novelty of going into the game. For me personally, can I draw an example here? I think the beauty of TFT is when you can build in a triangular formation of decision trees where the game opens up in variation, right? So let's just put a bunch of 1-costs here. Actually, hold on a second. Actually, this builder is cracked. They like put backliners in the back and frontliners in the front. So you have 1 costs here, right? And theoretically, what I like about TFT is this is your opening shops, and the possibilities of what you can play widens like this. So you start out, this is the beginning of game. This is stage 1, this is stage 2, this is stage 3, stage 4, stage 5. I think TFT becomes much more interesting because depending on what you see, you can play all these different lines and variations. But a big problem foundationally of what's kind of been happening lately is it's actually inverted. It almost feels like you have all these options in stage 1, and then you like cut it out until you can play stage 2. And then even drawing it in this shape is like kind of disingenuous. The way it's actually is right now is like this. You like basically have stage 1. You kind of can stay open on stage 2, but by stage 3, you kind of know exactly what you're playing. And design of like how everything has been pushed so that I don't even know why I'm playing these units. It just feels like TFT kind of pushes you into this direction where like the best thing to do is to just say, okay, well, screw all this. I know exactly what I'm playing. I do think that this is also a symptom of, I do think there's one other important element to bring up here, which is I think that this is also a symptom of the player base just getting better. I think that some people, I get this message actually every day, but people say like, do you think TFT Academy like ruined climbing ranked? Because it feels like you've given all the tools and you like kind of emphasize to people like how to optimize everything. You're like kind of encouraging them to play across meta because there's so many people. I actually there's a channel that we used to have called TFT Academy Spottings, and because before it was like, you know, whenever we were mentioned to be like, hey, it's kind of cool, man. Like people are talking about us. Now it's just like we're everywhere, and now people are like rolling their eyes. They're like using it as if it's like a pejorative thing. Man, I've been queuing up against it's impossible to climb the Masters this set because all these TFT Academy jabronis who are drooling on their keyboard just copy pasting from the #1 website, TFT Academy, where they master their skills in teamfight tactics and uncover the latest meta trends with tier lists and comps for every patch, particularly created by TFT experts Frodan and Disrupt. Can't believe I'm losing to these guys. It's kind of weird. I feel like it's almost like become like a euphemism. TFT Academy user. There's nothing wrong with that, man. It's a great website. So that's kind of where we're at, right? That's kind of where we're at with this post. A lot of people responded saying, agreed. Even with 3 emblem golem, portal feels stronger to focus on 1 emblem for tempo. I mean, actually, funny enough, I think with this set, I actually think 3 emblem golem is like less problematic because of the way they trade the verticals. In fact, I actually think I would put 3 emblem golem on like the bottom half of the top 10 worst offenders. Like I think I think artifact is like awful to play right now. I think artifact anvils are just completely awful. I think some other portals could also be up there. I think like, I don't want to say crab ray or scuttle puddle, but I think anything that feels like the inevitability of the lobby snowballing against you, it's very pronounced in a set like this right now, mainly because of the set mechanic, which could be a different thing. I'm probably gonna do like a set review, like talk about how I feel about set 15, probably like in a month and a half or so, but that'll probably go in it. Also, I think this guy brings up a really good point. I think this is the reason people think shop odds are fucked. 0 flex play means rolling down and not seeing the exact needs you need means you are doomed, so you pay more attention when energy doesn't go your way. I think that's describing elements of it, which is like you are looking for very specific things as opposed to spending your gold and realizing that you can play other things as well. It does feel like that's partially what's at play. And most of the sentiment here from these people are saying like it's very true. It feels inflexible. I think it's right. I think this person brings up a really interesting counterpoint, which is Mordog talking about how novelty is really important. And we're gonna get to the Mordog response in a second here, and then we'll go fully into the subject. Good morning, everybody. Happy Tuesday. Started a new month, which means more fun stuff for TFT. I want to start off the month by giving a preview of upcoming artifacts that have been worked on. Our goal right now is that this will release in patch 14.9, and that's confusing because this was back in set 11. And this is where they introduced like all of these new oh my god, Corrupt Vampire Acceptor. I forgot this artifact existed. This literally only worked on 1 champion that was manless every single set. Man, this was like Silvermere Dawn cranked up to like a 1,000. It was unbelievably sharp, and I think that was bad design, but they removed that. Our goal with the artifact systems to be very different than core items. Core items have gotten a bit more homogenous and give you a bit of stat so that they can be very flexible. You never feel like you're 100% out of luck if you get the wrong components. This has limited proper design space for items. Artifacts are meant to be much more unique and open up wild possibilities, but as a result, will opt to be much more narrower. And that's actually sort of like an overarching concept that's actually affected TFT as a whole. It's okay, for an example, if an artifact is only viable in a few or even 1 champion per set. These are meant to be awesome, unique experiences you can set with different champions that reach new heights. It's actually interesting. We read this 1 year later. We're excited for you guys to try these. Stay more tuned for previews. Yep. Basically, I hope, enjoy and good luck. So Mortdog actually responded. That was a really long preface. If you guys are watching this, you're like, man, you took forever to get to the Mortdog part. This is where it gets good, I think. First of all, it's important to note that Mort posted this yesterday on Labor Day during the holiday. Hey folks, happy Labor Day. Hope you have a great time wherever you are. I want to take a second to acknowledge and talk about the thread titled Competitive TFT Isn't Fun Anymore. There's a lot of good points in the thread, and I appreciate Christopher for bringing it up. TFT has been around for 6 years now, which is crazy. 6 years is a long time. And players understanding the game has evolved, which is creating some new challenges that are on top of our mind as well right now. First, let's start with some challenges that we're aligned with that needs to be taken pretty seriously. One, the game is too committal to one too often. Agree with this problem statement. There's a combination of factors right now, including but not limited to too many committal augments like hero and trait augments, fruits with stacking, and the risk of trying to swap off a power fruit, item and artifact rigidity, which is fun in contrast to what he just said, right, with artifacts in that previous post. That's why I brought it up. Optimized trait structures. And optimized trait structures. While it's important we have some options that commit people to 2-1 to help players who like that initial seeding direction, I believe we're currently too far in this space. I mean, I agree with that. I think a big part of, and maybe this is what he means by design. There's a lot of elements of like the early game where if you take an augment, it just kind of tells you what you have to do, right? And there's anything from branching out, which I think is fun. I think branching out should exist in the game, to Kit and Caretaker's Ally. But there's also like many other things besides the hero augments that say like what you are doing, right? And it kind of puts you on rails. Maybe augments in general need to be more generic. Maybe they need to be less directional, but then that would make it more boring for a lot of players. A lot of players want to play TFT because they want to be excited and they want that novelty, and that it does matter. Oh, one comment, by the way, on the previous thread that I didn't mention that I remember reading when I was browsing last night was that one of them said that the reality is designing the game for us in the subreddit, we're like a small percent, we're like 1 to 2%. Is it even worthwhile to make it a game for us when you would lose a lot of players who would not enjoy the game that way? And I think that's a fair comment that person presented. Okay, 2, comps are too optimized so that flexing isn't realistic. Also generally agree here. And to be clear, we don't have any intention of removing flex play, although how powerful it is versus verticals will naturally change from patch to patch and set to set, mainly because of balance. If you have the items to make a Yumicon work and hit something like Rise or Karma, it's generally too costly and unrealistic to swap over them, since you'd likely to swap your entire surrounding comp as well to match the optimized lines for those champs. Part of this also stems from the fact that right now most powerful lines of fruits are quite a bit stronger than alternatives. Again, balance issue, leading to pretty narrow paths you can take in your team building. Fruits have made this even more true as certain fruits enables lines, and without them, you're too far behind in power. I mean, I think he's just speaking facts. One thing we don't talk about is that almost every champion right now pretty much just wants 1 or 2 fruits. Is there even an example of a champion that you can use a wide variety of fruits for? Maybe Ashe? That's because they're all incredibly mid now. Maybe Sky. I think maybe Skypiercer might be her best. Her best power up right now, which we might have to change that on the website. There's too much power in verticals and not in the units. So what's interesting about this one right now in the live meta is that there are examples where it is true for sure. 6 Duelist Udyr, A Star Guardian Jinx, Fire Prodigy Yuumi being the biggest one. But there's also clear examples where this is not true. The highest cap comp in the game is around Varus, TF, Zyra, and basically ignores trades completely. Malphite Snipers also mostly ignored verticals, choosing to play mostly bronze and silver trades because there's so much power in Malphite and Jhin. There's also just generally comps that are small in their verticals that you should in theory be able to flex around, such as 4 Supreme Cells Kai'Sa that's now playing Rammus, or 4 Mentor, which went from a 5 mech comp to now a 3 mech, 3 Executioner comp. I agree with that. Support units could help fix things. While we're in turn looking at things like support units, there's a lot of folks on the team who want them back as well. This does not solve a lot of the challenges we're running into. Due to how comps are optimized in modern TFT, a support champ would often be on the question, does this fit into the comp? Comps with smaller power requirements like Kai'Sa Mentor comps, or even 6 Duelists, which doesn't need as much, will have a free slot to run these, while comps that don't, such as 5 Prodigy Yuumi, are likely not going to be able to afford the free slot. And I think that is mostly, I'm mostly agreed with that. That doesn't mean that support units won't help people feel like they have options, right? I think that's the big problem with it is it doesn't feel like you can roll for anything else. The reason why we want to support units is it feels like we have alternatives for if we don't hit this. If you don't hit this, what can you do if you don't hit this? This all leads us to the fundamental issue right now that I'm seeing that TFT needs to figure out, and that is, I think he says it right here, and that the perception and sometimes reality of optimization leads to a rigid game experience. I mean, okay, but the thing is, it's not just perception. There is a lot of rigidity to the game. So, but I think he's trying to make a point here. Generally, at any given point in building out your comp, there's a decision point. If you look at 5 Prodigy, 5 Battle Academia Yumi, why does this comp not function at 7 BA, 3 Prodigy? Because players have rightfully identified that the value of 2 more Prodigy with units like Ezreal and Syndra outweighed the value of more BA with Jason Caitlyn. This is currently, quote, solved. You can adjust this with balance, such as nerfing 5 Prodigy, but the second you do, the solve will be swapped to 7 BA, 3 Prodigy. Unless the balance around this decision is perfect, there will always be a perceived correct answer decision laid out like this. And I think he's right, because if you guys remember, do you guys remember set 12 with the Fairy Callista? Sorry if this brings up some trauma for you guys, but Fairy Callista, the composition, it was always incorrect to ever play more than the minimum amount of fairy, like more than 5 fairy. I think it was like 3, 5, 7. It was always incorrect to play 7 fairy because you would just rather play 5 and play other units, right? And they don't want that experience to happen for the players. And that's kind of what he's talking about. Like, yeah, they can nerf 5 Prodigy, but then there's another version of it. Unless the balance around the decision is perfect, there will always be a perceived correct answer to any decision laid out about this. Sorry, TFT Academy. I worry that in a world where every trait is maxed at 2 to 3 to simulate the removal of powerful verticals, there would still be a perceived best setup for various comps. I mean, yes, but it would make it more. I mean, I think the argument against this is that it would make it still more interesting than just like, well, these 8 units you always play. But I guess what he's saying, like, even if every trait was maxed at 2 or 3, there would still be you always play these units, which is kind of what is happening with this Varus comp, right? This Varus comp actually has flexibility to it, but everyone plays it as if it's just the 9 units you roll for. But there actually is flexible slots in this comp, but people play it as if there isn't. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I watched some streamers over the weekend. They played Fast 9 Varus and they rolled and they said, I missed. And I'm like, I think you should have bought things like some of these things on the way down. But they're like, no, I rolled down for these 9 units in the planner for Varus Fast. They're still playing it like this. Maybe because it's a skill issue, or maybe they're correct. Who knows? But that's what I think more Dog's talking about, the perception of it. We still see the challenges here as well and experience the frustration when we play with our live games. So we're right there with you. I don't have any specific solutions I can share today, but I did want to go on record as saying we see things as well and are actively working on improvements. Appreciate discussion and wanted you to know that. So it's cool. It's cool that Riot actually responded to this. It's cool that Mordog responded to this so quickly, because this was all within a 1-day period, right? This was 1 day ago. This is 15 hours ago on a holiday. So this is another mark of like why I think many people appreciate TFT. For some people, this is literally why you stick around, literally because of that. So this kind of communication is great. I would say that. I want to say the first thing that I want to say is that this is really deeply appreciated, and it's great. The second thing I want to say is that this is also starting to sound very similar to some of the messaging that we hear around things such as the dev learnings articles. Because another really cool thing that I love about about TFT and the Riot dev team is that they put out like a dev learnings article at the end of the set. But they keep saying things like, oh, we're going to be working on this, and these are some of the lessons we learned. But then it feels like either the next set or 2 sets afterwards, it still feels like there's some issues around that. Whether it's like we learned that we shouldn't be putting as much power in the trades in some of these like verticals, for example. They've actually pointed that in the past. And then it feels like they don't actually put that into implementation. Maybe it's a dev cycle thing. Maybe because, as you guys know, TFT is right now working on, I think they're working on like set 18 right now. Like they're working not just on set 16, they're finalizing that, but set 17 should already be like in motion. I think they're like working like 3 sets. So maybe the stuff they're learning now is not something to be felt a year, but that type of process feels like this is almost like setting up expectations to fail if that ends up being the case. That could be part of it. Another part of it is you know, players are just the perception around it, right? That's what he's talking about. The perception about these things is not actually matching reality. That could be, it could be on us. I don't think it's necessarily on us, if because a lot of the people that are saying this are people that want to be open-minded about it. But I do have to say that this is something that is appreciated, but I think actions speak a lot louder than words in terms of, if you feel our frustration, let's actually see steps to get there. Now, I will say that I have to say one thing, that a lot of my discussion around this is that I actually think a lot of this is balance, personally. Like, for example, they could just make, remember when Cassante was so good that you could just play him in every comp, and it didn't really matter if you had Wraith or Protector, you could just play him there. And that is kind of like what flex units can theoretically be. And they can make a lot of units like that. They can make all the vertical Star Guardians give 1% buff, and they can make Jinx 2 just be really strong, so you can play Jinx with anything. They could do that. But they don't, because they want to have a more dynamic game in terms of activating traits, playing on your items, playing on your augments, things like that. Because it's not just good. The emphasis that a lot of what this person is saying, Tofo is saying, is that if we design the game a lot of like heavily skewed towards this, which is not what he's asking for, but if we did skew heavily towards this would make it that traits don't matter, and to a certain extent, items don't matter, because what really matters is whether or not you hit your upgraded units and you just play around your upgrades. And for some people that might be more fun, but for a lot of people that's not fun. You don't want certain things to only matter and other things not. But with that all said, I think balance in general in TFT has gotten a lot better. I add so much preface because I feel like it's important to have nuance in this conversation. I actually think that generally speaking, on average, balance in TFT has gotten a lot better. Not this set. I think this set has been pretty bad overall, but that's because when I say bad, okay, bad is like a really strong word. It has not been to the level of where it was as recent as set 13. Set 13, I think, was a pretty good balance set, even though 6 costs were BS, but that's whatever. I think set 13 was pretty good. But then like set 12 was pretty bad, right? We can just say it. Set 12 was kind of a disaster. But then there's like, you know, phases where TFT has been good or bad. On average, TFT has been really good about balance lately. But it feels bad to kind of be taking these 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back type of feeling. That's what's going on. I think more also respond to some things here, because there's a lot of people that talk about different things of what they want. Like, you know, I don't think it's good to play for loose streak this game, or I don't like playing around 2 main units in a concentrated. You know, I don't want all these double components and all this stuff. So we could be here all day yapping about it. This could be like a 4-hour powwow. But I want to just go over every time that Mort responded. So the first response was Clear. Clear is a player that qualified for regionals like a few years ago. He was sort of like, he was basically the predecessor to Dehua, just a rage baiter in chat that had qualified for an event and then just like loves dropping hot takes and disagreeing with people. So I think he's largely retired now since he went back to school, but he's a fun guy to talk to. He said reducing the power level items in some way narrowed the gap between the best and worst items, but what it did was increase the reliance on traits to contribute to the strength of your comp. When items were strong and traits were weaker, you could buy different 2-star 4 costs in the main care of your composition and would function reasonably well. So nowadays, if you're playing on Karma and you see 3 Yumis and 2 Leonas in your shop, you just roll past it. Sure, you got Yumi 2 for free, but for Yumi to do anything, you need all her accompanying traits, right? He's basically saying because items are pretty much consolidated, now the way you extract additional value, because it doesn't, like, items are like kind of similar. You would extract value through your trades. It would also cost you another 40, 50 gold to pivot to BA and project units you don't have. And he does a bunch of math here. Holy cow, I did like a lot of math of like what BA is like with Jason without BA. If I'm playing on Dare's Hero and I find Jace 3, how could I ever pivot to Jace carry instead when I need 6 other units that I don't have for him to function at all? A lot of the 4 or 5 piece traits are equivalent to power of 7, 8 piece from 2+ years old sets. Some of these 7, 8 piece traits straight up look like prismatic traits from sets long ago. Moore says, I agree on the item thing. That's actually a great point that item power going down has made them less impactful. The trait one, I'm not so sure I agree on, though. Do you have any specific examples? Usually when we look at old stuff, we laugh at how OP it was. Vanguard being 300 armor. According to Mort, assassin traits made the game very difficult to balance. I did not say this. Or maybe he didn't. Seems I'm misremembering. You did on stream. All right. That's it. I don't want assassins. That's all he said. That's all he said. So he didn't actually reply to anything else. Okay, so like what can really be done about this? I mean, I think that the reality is TFT as a whole, the player base is getting too good. I mean, I would say my conclusion as one, the game has been optimized a lot. We're partially responsible, but I think that's just the inevitability of it. Two, I do think that TFT is going to continue to struggle because, as far as I know, TFT when you play around verticals is actually really popular with casuals. It's really popular because they people just want to play around. When I play other games, that are like TFT, the first thing that I do is try to play in their verticals because it just makes it easier to gravitate to and hold on to. But is it too optimized or are things too powerful? I think partially it's also exacerbated by how many more powerful things there are right now because of power-ups, because of artifacts, and anything like that. TFT in general is just power inflated. It's no longer about resources. It's just about if you hit Udyr 2 and you have best items on him, and you have best items on him, and you have Colossal on him, you cannot kill him unless you have like the actual Giga Nut set up yourself. Like that's a problem. I think that's the problem that they need to solve. Because I think it's true at its core that TFT can feel like a grind fest. It feels too similar. It feels like too repetitive after a while.